Did somebody say Oscar buzz? That's right, folks. We're back with another double feature. This time looking at two movies that have been out for a bit. You know, there's a bunch of critic screenings that you could have seen recently. And they're movies that I think are worth talking about. They both got awards contention around them. People being like, we could see Best Picture noms for both of these. You could make the direct path to success in terms of awards and recognition, but maybe they're not going to get that. Because while I think both these movies are interesting, I don't know if I'd say both of them are great. We're talking two movies today. Emilia Pérez and Blitz. Two very different movies with very different approaches to themselves. One very different and satisfying and creative, and the other one, you've kind of seen it a million times before. But let's start with Emilia Pérez. This one is so different than a lot of other movies. I really didn't know what to expect going into it. I heard the praise when it premiered at Cannes. Everyone was just kind of like, watch out for this one. It's going to be a crowd pleaser. All the critics I follow have been saying it's really exciting, very interesting, and that's get me excited. The lead actresses in this film, I think it's the three lead actresses in this film, Selena, Zoe, and Carla, they all got the best actress award at Cannes, so that's exciting. That's something to look for. So when there's a screening available near me, I wanted to go check it out, and I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I don't think it's my favorite of the awards contention Best Picture noms that could get Best Picture nom, but I think this is a very cool choice for a lot of those big awards that it could be getting. I like the idea of this getting score or song or editing or production or cinematography. All those would be really cool. If you are not familiar with this film, it is like a crime musical where we are following this drug cartel, one of the biggest drug cartel people in all of Mexico. He is looking to change his life by transitioning into a woman. He's always felt like something was missing from his life, so he wants to transition. He hires Zoe Saldana's character to set it up in a very discreet manner so he could literally leave this world behind. And that is the first arc of this story. And without getting too deep into spoilers, what we do in the second half of the film is deal with the ramifications of that. How do you deal with loneliness and masculinity and vulnerability when you did this very impactful thing? That's a really cool premise. That is the premise for a movie you have never seen before. There is no other movie that is dealing with that premise, this idea, in any major capacity. It's such a unique way to present this story. That's so cool. And then randomly making it a musical, that is so much more interesting too, because you can do something drastically fun and entertaining and really have moments of characters being vulnerable on screen in a way that's different than how we would normally present that. It is such a fun movie. It looks so good. Everyone is just acting their asses off. I was blown away by every single performance in this movie. I think Zoe Saldana gives my favorite performance of the year in this movie. It is fantastic. She is so commanding. The way she is moving her body in this, we have seen her do some very incredible work. I know she's a great actress. You know she's a great actress. We are all fully aware of what Zoe Saldana can do. But the physicality and the emotional breakage on her face that we see in this, it's stuff we don't get to see from her often. I love the way she handles herself. She presents herself. There's so much power and presence, but she never feels like she's in command of the room. I think that's really cool. And when she does full-on dance sequences, oh man, I did not expect that to be from her. It's an incredible performance that's very subtle until we do the musical numbers. And then when we do the musical numbers, everybody gets to be loud. She is so good at that. Same with Carla Sofia Gasson. Not too familiar with her work, of course. I think she's the breakout sensation of this. Somebody who, as soon as they step on screen, you're like, oh, I see exactly where we're going with this. I like every single angle we play up with this character in this world. This is the mafia boss that transitions. And when we see them on screen the first time, you're like, okay, I see what we're doing. Get towards the later half, you're like, yep, this is awesome. I love this storyline. I love where the storyline goes. It works so well. It goes into so many different directions and it becomes something so different than what you're expecting. A big theme of this movie kind of becomes like how the situation you're born into changes and warps your perspective and affects how you think you're supposed to behave, which I think is like really powerful to talk about. It's not something we haven't seen in film before, but the fact that a movie of this caliber is showing you like men in this position are kind of thrust into roles they don't typically want, and they feel trapped, unable to escape. And I think how it handles that's really cool. Just the idea that you don't need to be masculine and you can be your true self and still find your happiness. Like, that's really cool. I really dig what that's playing up. None of the characters feel beholden to men either. Some of them are more like lusting for men, but none of the characters are like trapped to either like the male version of themselves or like a man in their lives. There's no really underlying current of like love being like this thing that controls. It's people realizing that they're better off either without men or being their fullest person. And that's kind of interesting to see. It really works for like a story like this, and you get a lot of cool stuff out of there. Selena Gomez might be like the most surprising name for something attached to this. Like, I always forget she does things like this, you know? Very strong presence. Of the three, it's probably the character I personally connected to the least, but I love the energy. She gets some really interesting numbers. She gets like one really cool solo number that gets like the most like musical and kind of like ethereal, where we're like literally leaving the scene to different places. I really like that. It does have that very specific musical vibe, like just breaking out into song, you know, where we don't change locations. People will like stop in the street and they'll like dance behind you or whatever. But it never feels like a classic, 50s musical where we're like big sweeping sets and colors. It's all realistic, natural settings. And for that, the camera work is beautiful and the cinematography is beautiful. I really do like the way it's lit. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but it's lit really well. It doesn't feel too dark. We do a lot of stuff at night and it looks really well lit in the dark. And that's something that rarely happens these days. So that makes it so much more worth it too. There's some beautiful love stories in here, love going in different directions, how characters talk to each other. A very tight script that is so strong. Beautiful script, just really impactful lines of dialogue that just make you go, oh man, that is exactly how a character would feel or react in a situation like this. It has such a melancholy ending of just, this is the reality of what we do. Can you escape your past, or are you trapped in it forever? Which I think is such like an important story to say through like the lens of like a trans lead. I'm not going to pretend to know like the full, meaning behind transitioning, but I think what this movie really presents is that it's has this need of escapism and to let yourself be whole. And that is something you hear a lot in the case of trans people, but this movie really presents it like you're in a very bad situation when you are not allowing yourself to be your fully realized person. And when you get there, you start to realize that maybe the person you were before you transitioned wasn't a good person, and you don't like what that is. So you're literally going to go out of your way to actively change that perception of how you see yourself. That's really cool. And I'm glad a story like this exists. The songs are interesting. A lot of them are in Spanish. Now, I don't speak Spanish, and I don't listen to a lot of like Spanish music. So like the beats and like the chorus and like the way the verses flow, it's different than what you'd hear from like an American-based musical. So that's going to take some adjustment if that's something that's going to like affect you, because you'd be like, oh, this doesn't sound naturalistic, but I think it is if you're Spanish. Like, it works really well. This is a really cool movie. And if you get a chance to see it on like a big screen in a theater, it plays really well when you're like locked in, you're honed in on everything going on. These girls are great. I know why they won the Cannes Award, because it's awesome. They get so much fun stuff to do. This is a good movie. And I hope a lot of people check it out. Like, I think it's going to do really good. I think it's on Netflix it's coming to. Or is it Mubi? It might be like Mubi internationally. I can't remember. Going to do really good, whatever service it comes to, because it is such a crowd-pleasing musical that has a very modern twist to it and leaves its characters in situations where they're not fully realized at the end or like fully satisfied. And that's just kind of like the story of life, isn't it? That's just life. And I appreciate it for just being that honest about the reality of the world we're in and the reality that the characters have for themselves. So Emilia Pérez, I am going to give a 7 out of 10. Now let's switch over to Blitz. Yeah, this is the new film from Steve McQueen, a director I like. I always like when he's got a new project coming out. He is a guy who's very fascinating and has made some good stuff. And Blitz is just this year's big World War II movie. There's one every year. I'm not criticizing it. It's a topic I think a lot of directors and writers like to go back to because it's so easy to tell you like who the good guy is, who the bad guy is. There's a whole generation that still like remembers that era. So yeah, I don't care. This is like the millionth time we've gone to World War II. What new spin do you have for me? We are following Saoirse Ronan. She is a single mother who lost the father of her son. He was deported through acts of racism. Her son is a black child, and he's growing up in a prominently white neighborhood. Well, the war is going on. It's the Blitzkrieg, which means the bombs are dropping. Like, neighborhoods that these people live in are going to be destroyed. There are so many moments where we just like cut to the bombs dropping and see the panic on the streets as everyone tries to rush into a bomb shelter. It's always effective, you know, like it's the war. We know this is like the big one of the two big ones. We know how effective it is to tell this story. Even when we're doing somewhat of a new spin on it, it's going to work in a lot of ways. So in order to like help protect her son, she's going to send him away to like a special school or camp or just like somewhere to keep him safe. So he boards a train, but the kid, his name is George, he gets really frustrated that he'd like left without being nice to his mom. So he jumps off the train and he goes on a journey through a war-torn country. That's the premise of this movie, and it cuts between the two storylines. We follow Saoirse Ronan, she plays Rita. She is like working at like a steel mill or whatever, just like building stuff for the war effort. I don't think they're building the bombs, but they're building stuff for the bombs or something like that. I don't know. She is like wanting to like help figure out like the right side of history to be on, being like a normal woman. She's got like a subplot of like Harris Dickinson and he wants to like date her, but he doesn't know how to talk to her. It's very interesting. I think it's more interesting because Saoirse Ronan is just a really good actor and can command a sequence. There's like a scene in this film where she has to like stand up on a stage and sing to people and she gets nervous and I'm like, that feels very realistic. That feels like somebody acting. And I like that. I like when she is just commanding the room. And, you know, it's just classic, like, war scenery. I don't think it feels like cosplay at all. But we've seen this type of world so much that you're just like, I know. I know what we're doing here. I know how these people behave. These girls have power. They need more, like, you know, workers. They need more bunkers. The world's going to blow up at any moment. There is effective imagery. And that's kind of interesting. And the story with, what's his name here? Elliot Heffernan, he's the one who plays George. It starts off really interesting. I like the idea that this kid jumps off the train. He wants to go home to his mom. And then along the way, he like runs into like different groups of characters. Like first off, he starts like meeting other kids that run away. And then he runs into like a black soldier working in Britain. I think they're in Britain. I can't remember where they were. I think it's Britain. And like he's like learning about like African heritage essentially. And then where this movie takes like a complete like 180 for me in terms of like the tone we're talking about here is when Stephen Graham shows up with like his gang of thieves who like once there's like an air raid, they go into like the buildings that were attacked and like they steal jewelry off dead bodies. I'm like, what the fuck? Did this suddenly become like a cartoon? Oi, we gotta go in here, blimey. Like they literally talk like a bunch of cartoon character thieves. And it's so stupid. And it literally destroys the flow of the movie. Like, you can't have those characters in here and then have, like, a sequence where it's, like, a flash flood in a subway and people are drowning. Like, it just doesn't work. The movie also wraps up very quick. That's not really satisfying and then just, like, ends. But I think it's because we're not really talking about the war. We're talking more about, like, socialism, which is, like, okay. I mean, that's fine. There's kind of the idea that, like, maybe Christianity is like the strongest like belief to follow. It doesn't like become like a through line, but it is brought up like once or twice. You're like, Is that what McQueen is pushing here? Is that what we should be feeling in this moment? It's not like, annoying, but it's there. You're like, okay. But also it's about like kumbaya and how we should all accept each other and be together. I don't know. This one just doesn't feel fully realized. It feels like we wanted to tell a story in World War II that hasn't been told before, but it's been told before. And you know how I just said Emilia Pérez has really good lighting in the dark and nighttime? This one doesn't. This one doesn't. I'm not the biggest fan of Blitz. It's a story you've seen before, done better in other places. But Saoirse Ronan is truly a magnificent actress, and I like when she is on screen because she is good. So, Blitz, I am going to give a 6 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.